Everyone knows the story of Robin Hood, the outlaw who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. But what if I told you the earliest stories don't show him as a noble hero at all? Some describe him as violent, ruthless, even a murderer. So, who is Robin Hood really? A champion of the poor, or just another outlaw, later rewritten into legend? Before we dive deeper into the forgotten ballads, make sure you subscribe to the Silent Lodge. Here, legends are never silent, and every story hides a truth waiting to be uncovered. To uncover the truth about Robin Hood, we have to go back, not to the silver screen, not to colorful storybooks, but to the oldest surviving ballads of medieval England. These weren't bedtime stories. They were rough, bloody tales sung in alehouses and markets, carried on the lips of wandering minstrels from town to town. In these forgotten tales, Robin Hood is not the charming rogue we know today. He is an outlaw in the truest sense of the word, living outside the law, feared by common folk as much as the nobility. One of the earliest and most important sources is a Gest of Robyn Hode, a ballad written sometime in the 15th century. It's long, sprawling, and filled with contradictions. In some passages, Robin shows kindness, helping a poor knight in need. But in others, he ambushes wealthy travelers, extorts money, and shows little mercy to those who resist. The truth is messy. He was not consistently noble, nor purely cruel. Instead, he was a figure who embodied both sides of the outlaw's coin: generosity and brutality. Other ballads are even harsher. In Robin Hood and the Monk, one of the oldest surviving tales, Robin kills a man without hesitation after being betrayed. He doesn't pause, doesn't show remorse. He acts as a hardened outlaw, not a saint. And in Robin Hood and Guy of Gisborne, the famous duel with Gisborne ends not with a chivalrous handshake, but with Robin brutally slaying his opponent and mutilating his body to disguise it. This was the kind of grim violence that audiences of the time expected in their outlaw tales. Imagine being a peasant in 14th century England. You work the land, pay heavy taxes, and live under constant fear of famine. On your way to market, you might be stopped on the road by armed men hiding in the forest. If their leader was Robin Hood, perhaps you would admire his defiance of authority, or perhaps you would fear him just as much as the lords you despised. The romantic idea of stealing only from corrupt lords to give to the poor? That's a modern invention. The earliest Robin Hood was not bound by morality. He lived by his own rules, outside the law, admired by some and hated by others. This duality is what made him compelling. He was unpredictable, at times generous, at times ruthless. In a way, he reflected the brutal realities of medieval life, where survival often depended not on justice, but on strength and cunning. Think about it. If Robin Hood had only ever been kind, gentle, and noble, his stories might not have survived the centuries. It was his dangerous edge, his unpredictability, that made audiences listen, remember, and retell the tales. And yet, this darker Robin Hood, the outlaw of the earliest ballads, is the version most of us have never heard. If this darker side of Robin Hood surprises you, wait until you hear how later generations completely rewrote his story. And while you're here, tap that like button so more people can discover these forgotten legends with us at the Silent Lodge. But if Robin Hood began as a feared outlaw, how did he become the gallant champion we celebrate today? The answer lies in the centuries of storytelling that followed. By the 16th and 17th centuries, Robin Hood had been reshaped into something entirely new. Ballads and plays began portraying him as a noble rebel, a man who resisted corrupt sheriffs and greedy nobles, not poor peasants. His violence was softened, his motives reimagined. Characters like Little John, Friar Tuck, and Maid Marian began to appear. These companions added warmth, humor, and even romance. Robin Hood was no longer a lone outlaw. he had a band of merry men, symbols of loyalty and camaraderie. Instead of bloody ambushes, his adventures became clever tricks and daring rescues. Instead of terrorizing the countryside, he was now fighting for justice. And then came the Victorians, who adored tales of noble knights and romantic heroes. They took Robin Hood's story and polished it further, turning him into a moral figure who defended the weak and punished the wicked. By the time Hollywood got its hands on him, the transformation was complete. On screen, Robin Hood was dashing, witty, courageous. Errol Flynn's swashbuckling hero in 1938 cemented him as a larger-than-life champion. And Disney's 1973 cartoon, with Robin Hood as a lovable fox, introduced him to generations of children as a harmless, cheerful hero. The outlaw had become a saint, and the bloody origins, buried, forgotten, almost erased. But was Robin Hood ever real, or just a story? Historians have debated this question for centuries. Some believe Robin Hood was based on a real man, or even several men, whose lives and deeds were gradually fused together into a single legend. One candidate is Robert of Locksley, sometimes written as Robin of Locksley, a man said to have lived in Yorkshire in the 12th century. Later ballads even link Robin's name to Locksley Hall. But hard evidence is scarce. Some historians believe this association was invented much later, to give the myth a convenient birthplace. Another figure often mentioned is Robin of Wakefield, another outlaw recorded in legal documents. And in Nottinghamshire, near Sherwood Forest itself, there are references to men with names like Robyn Hode appearing in court records. But here's the problem. In medieval England, Robin Hood was such a common outlaw nickname that it may not have referred to any single man at all. In fact, legal records from as early as the 13th century show Robin Hode used almost like a stock name for bandits. If someone broke the law, fled to the forest, and began living as a fugitive, he might be called a Robin Hood, whether or not that was his real name. In this sense, Robin Hood was less a person, more an idea, a symbol of defiance against authority, feared by law-abiding citizens, but admired by those suffering under corrupt officials. And this duality, hero to some, villain to others, is exactly what made the name endure. The geography of the legend is also telling. Many ballads place Robin in Barnesdale, Yorkshire, while others root him firmly in Sherwood Forest, Nottinghamshire. It seems as if storytellers across England adopted the figure and made him their own. Wherever there was unrest, a Robin Hood could emerge. Why did the legend spread so widely? Because Robin Hood's story gave voice to a universal frustration. England in the Middle Ages was no fairy tale. Heavy taxes, brutal punishments, famines, and corrupt sheriffs left ordinary people desperate. The idea of a man who struck back against greedy lords and corrupt officials resonated deeply. Robin Hood became more than a story. He became a dream. The dream that justice could be taken, that power could be defied, that even the poorest could laugh at authority if they had courage enough. But that dream had to be reshaped over time. For peasants, Robin Hood's lawlessness was thrilling. But for the educated classes, for churchmen, and later Victorian moralists, the story had to be polished. The blood had to be cleaned away, the thefts explained, the violence softened. Thus, the outlaw became a folk hero, not because that was who he really was, but because that was who society needed him to be. We're about to uncover the truth. Was Robin Hood a hero, a villain, or something far stranger? If you're fascinated by how myths blur with reality, hit subscribe to The Silent Lodge right now. That way, you won't miss the next mystery we bring back from the shadows. There's also another fascinating layer to the legend: politics. In some later tales, Robin Hood is linked to the idea of supporting the rightful king, often King Richard the Lionheart, against his corrupt brother, Prince John. This political angle was likely added centuries after the first ballads. It gave Robin Hood not just personal motives, but a patriotic one. But the earliest stories? They make no mention of Richard or John. In fact, Robin's earliest adventures are set during times when those kings weren't even alive. This suggests that the Robin Hood fighting for King Richard version was added later, perhaps to make him a safer, more respectable hero, aligned with national pride rather than rebellion. So, was Robin Hood real? The evidence is thin, contradictory, and scattered across centuries. But whether he was one man, many men, or no man at all, his legend carried something far more powerful than truth. It carried hope. Hope that justice could be won, not given. Hope that the powerful were not untouchable. Hope that somewhere in the forest, a man with a bow and a sharp wit was fighting for the people. So was Robin Hood a hero or a villain? The truth is, he was both. In the earliest ballads, he was a feared outlaw, a man who robbed travelers, spilled blood, and lived outside the law. Yet in later centuries, he became a noble rebel, a champion of the weak, a symbol of justice against corruption. Maybe there was never a single Robin Hood at all? Perhaps he was a patchwork of different men, stitched together by storytellers, reshaped by generations to fit their needs. And perhaps that is the real secret of Robin Hood's survival. He endures not because he was real, but because he was useful. To kings and commoners, to writers and filmmakers, he has always been whatever we wanted him to be. Think about how many faces Robin Hood has worn. To a medieval peasant, he was a dangerous outlaw, but one who struck back at the lords and sheriffs they despised. To Elizabethan audiences, he was an entertainer, a folk figure whose adventures filled the stage with laughter and daring. To Victorians, he was a moral hero, aligned with chivalry and justice. And in modern times, Robin Hood has become a global icon. He is the noble rebel, the trickster, the archer who never misses, the fox in Disney green who made children cheer for the underdog. Every age remade Robin Hood in its own image, and in this sense, Robin Hood isn't just a legend, he's a mirror, reflecting what each society wants to believe about justice, rebellion, and hope. There's something timeless about the idea of an outlaw who fights back against the powerful. We find him again and again across cultures. The noble bandit, the trickster hero, the rebel who dares to defy authority. In China, it was Song Jiang of the water margin. In Mexico, Pancho Villa. In America, Jesse James. Robin Hood belongs to this family of legends, larger than life, never fully good, never fully evil, but always unforgettable. So when we ask, was Robin Hood a hero or a villain? The answer depends on who is telling the story. To the rich, he was a criminal. To the poor, he was a savior. To history, he was a myth that refused to die. And maybe that's what makes him so powerful. Because Robin Hood isn't bound to one truth. He is every truth, every fear, every hope. A legend that lives as long as we need him. What do you think? Was Robin Hood truly a hero? Or have we rewritten a dangerous outlaw into something we wished he was? If you enjoyed uncovering the darker side of this legend, there are countless more stories waiting in the shadows. Make sure you subscribe to the Silent Lodge and don't forget to like and share this video so more people can join us on this journey into forgotten myths and hidden histories. The Silent Lodge is where the world's most mysterious stories are never truly silent.